In 2013, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. My mom was a nurse for 50 years, and I was the resident healthcare expert in my family, having been in the biopharma industry for many years. But when it happens to you, it's like, where's the navigator? He passed away 4 months post his diagnosis. Here's my mom, who had been a nurse for 50 years. I knew enough to be asking questions, but the resources just weren't there.
Welcome to the Building the Noise podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Building the Noise podcast. Today we have the privilege of sitting down with a true champion for the patient voice in healthcare, Susan Hensley. Susan is a team lead for a U.S. advocacy function with a global pharmaceutical company. And with 3 decades of experience, she has dedicated her career to ensuring that the lived experiences of cancer patients are at the absolute center of medical innovation. From guiding conversations on how AI can empower patients to drive health equity initiatives, Susan is at the forefront of uniting industry, advocacy, and health systems. Susan, thank you for joining us today.
Matt, thanks so much for having me, and really appreciate this platform that you've created to have real conversations about advocacy. Genuinely grateful to be here, and look forward to the conversation today.
Yeah. So I like to start out with everyone with the same question, which is, why do you do the work that you do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So advocacy work, first of all, is so rewarding. And I'm grateful to be able to be in this role to really, at the end of the day, it's about helping others. And I've seen through various roles that I've had, in industry and even prior to industry, the impact and the change that we can make when we work together, truly help others. In this case, have access to what they need when faced with a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
So many people are, first of all, devastated with that diagnosis. I don't know anyone that isn't, but then having to, really fight the system to oftentimes navigate to get the care you need, to get the access to the medicines that you need. I do what I do because I truly believe that advocacy is making a difference for patients. Both on the policy side, when I worked in that space, it was the impact of a group of people coming together, multi-stakeholder types of organizations, patients, patient advocacy groups, medical societies, other stakeholders, in the benefit of a coalition coming together to truly make policy change that can impact, millions of people, honestly, in the right direction. But where I sit now within our organization, is in above brand commercial, working across a team that unites access, affordability, equity, and advocacy so that people who are impacted by a diagnosis of cancer have what they need at the right time to help them navigate effectively.
Yeah, and it's something that in our research we have always heard attributed to you and your organization is that going at it as a group approach. They always feel included and a part of the conversation, which I know is work that you have led within your organization. But, as you think about building those coalitions, it may have been, as you referenced in your work, we can even go as far back as your work in commercial. And then, as you said, you went into the government and policy space and then advocacy. But help the audience, which many of our listeners are also in the industry, looking at how do I make that pivot? What was it about those domains that you said, you know what, that's where I want to be? And how did you end up in those positions?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I would say my career journey was not necessarily linear, but I did, enter the industry in the commercial sales organization, in a variety of areas, primary care, cardiovascular, hospital, a variety of roles, and also account management. And when I was working in the account management space, I happened to be working in tobacco cessation was one area. And
Yeah,
as we all know, there's a lot of advocacy work that goes into tobacco cessation and in fighting for policies, really. But again, working with we had some advocates within health systems. I had the opportunity to work with the American Lung Association at the time, the American Cancer
mm,
Society, and really saw the benefit of the multi-stakeholder organizations coming together to drive change.
sure.
And so it was that point in time that there was, so I had been in commercial, I guess, for about 14 years at that point in time, but there was an opportunity to pivot into state government relations
Mm.
where I was able to, fortunate enough to get that role, having some of the experience. And I think understanding the business, first of all, and many of the issues that are impacting the business is really important.
One of the things that you have referenced here in your work there, that account management, and it's something that I've recognized in the research that I do, that those that always perform the best is their ability to manage relationships just like they did their accounts. You recognize, as you referenced here, the value of different voices and different stakeholders and bringing them together. You don't always have to be the expert. Sometimes you just have to be the convener. What has that work to help to allow you to do with regards to the maybe the policy space, but also as you referenced the advocacy world?
Yeah, it's a really good point and good question. I think it's seeing the value in what different stakeholders can bring to the table. I think it's, the importance of the patient voice and even helping patients understand that their voice is really important. Also, looking at, in many cases, it's understanding the issues that healthcare providers are facing and that their voice is important and bringing that to the
Mm,
table. And that it really is a collective effort that is needed to help advocate and drive change. So many people, even that I talk to personally, don't think about the importance of their voice and their story and how it really
yeah.
can impact change. I have to say, I don't know that I ever picked up the phone to talk to my local legislator before I worked in government relations, but just seeing the impact of the patient voice or whomever it might be, having those conversations with people that are, in a position to make change really makes a big difference. I think in the work that I'm doing now in oncology advocacy, we've seen the impact of dating back over the past 7 years, the impact of bringing together patient organizations, patient voices, what's important to them, what's important to to our organization, where can we come together to truly drive change. And some of the work that we've done dating back to 2019 is our popsy ecosystem that we call it. But back in 2019 it was about 30 advocacy leaders coming together with our organization leaders and aligning on what can we do to work together to really make change for patients. Where are the advocates seeing barriers to people
Mm,
accessing care? And it really boiled down to like three key areas: health equity, health literacy, and ensuring that the patient voice was incorporated in clinical research. And so fast forward to where we are today, we have over 120 partners that we come together with on a regular basis. I think there's been over 80 forums over the past 7 years where we've come together and just had conversations. What's important to them? What are we working on? What can we do better to help drive
mm,
forward change, patient-centric innovations, right?
yeah.
And we've now evolved that platform and under our umbrella of what we're calling now Patient Advocacy 360 are a series of patient-centric initiatives where, number one, we're working with the broader ecosystem of now these 120 130 partners, but we also have insight forums that are helping to drive forward everything that we're doing within the organization is patient focused, right? We're taking
Yeah.
these real insights from early on in R&D through commercialization. I actually just got off one of these insight forums in the breast cancer with the breast cancer community, about 8 patients and 6 advocates. And they were giving us feedback on things that we are working on right now that can help make sure that we are on point, that we are gonna resonate with the community, and that we're doing the right things to help people who are impacted by a cancer diagnosis. And then just our partnerships, the basic partnerships that we
Yeah.
have with the advocacy community, of how we're working together, how we're collaborating. We like to say collaborate to scale, so that patients do get the right information at the right time from the trusted sources. So we're collaborating and scaling information through our advocacy partners, but also through the channels and the wide reach that our organization has, both through digital social channels, but also through the ground game, through our field colleagues, who I think they find that providers that they're working with, health systems, really do value these credible advocacy resources that can really help patients navigate and get the care that they need, whether it be transportation or lodging or psychosocial
Yeah.
support.
No, I
So
really have to commend your organization on the willingness to continue to fight in health equity and health literacy. It's been an area that unfortunately a lot of organizations have stopped pursuing, but we know, and as you guys do as well, that those are the blockers primarily for most patients in A, understanding their diagnosis, or B, getting the best care they possibly can for themselves. And it means a lot to hear that you guys are continuing to put up a fight there, but including that large number of organizations that have come together under that umbrella. I will say, I don't think there's been a month or a quarter at least that have gone by that I haven't heard of your organization pulling groups together. And that's really what it means to do this work. What I want to ask you though is, you said this before, which is understanding and how to speak back to the business of the value of the work that you're doing. And that was both from a government policy perspective, but also as you think about advocacy. I think it's a space that a lot of people still have difficulty with when they get into that advocacy function, is how do I translate what a patient's story means to the business? What advice would you give to others in thinking about having that conversation?
I can tell you, I've been part of our oncology advocacy team, on the team, and then leading the team close to 10 years. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't have, for an internal conversation, a deck open on my desktop that
Yeah.
describes what our team does, right? Because it's a consistent education. It is speaking to the business too in language that they can understand. What are these patients bringing to the table? What are these insights that are coming to us? How are they relevant to the business priorities, right? And so it's translating that. And I think, Matt, that's part of me being with the company for close to 30 years. Having that business background and understanding what's important to the business is really critical, right? It's managing these large accounts, these large organizations, understanding what's important to the organizations, aligning that with what's important to the business. And that's where we
Yeah.
come together head on. But I will share with you, it's about the mutually beneficial partnership too.
Yep. Yep.
And I truly believe that if we're doing things for the right reason, the advocates see that,
Yeah.
right? And I think certainly our leaders, we're fortunately in a patient focused business. And I think when we're consistently talking about what's important to the patient, we're delivering innovations for patients. And I think we've been able to also show through our insight forums that we have in oncology. We have actually 10 of them in different therapeutic areas now, in
Wow.
different topics, like one in financial advocacy, one in precision medicine, where on a consistent basis, we're bringing together, like I just mentioned, the breast cancer committee, where we have set topics that the business knows now, R&D knows now, that they can come to us and they can get real insights that are going to be important to the work that they're doing, so that we are really on point when we're moving initiatives forward, whether it's an
Yeah.
R&D, whether it's a clinical trial protocol, whether it's how we're thinking about medicine administration, whether we're
Yeah.
thinking about a marketing campaign, right? What's going to
Yeah.
resonate so that we can really be on point and drive forward meaningful work, meaningful progress for patients. And at the end of the day, it's about driving for us, driving forward those patient centric innovations. So I
Yep.
think it's making sure we're on point with the advocacy community, understanding the business, bringing them together, but it's a consistent education. And
Yeah.
that's part of what we're doing. And at times you can tell I'm extremely passionate about this and
Yes.
passionate about the work that we do, but it is truly so important. If we are going to talk the talk, we need to walk the walk. And I think our advocacy partners, the advocacy community, the advocacy leaders that we work with really ground us in that. We also have a group that we call our patient centric advisors. So these are advocacy leaders that we meet with on a bi-monthly basis. They're in the oncology space, but they really keep us grounded. And we'll go to them. We'll bring in maybe somebody within the organization that they think their campaign is the best thing that since sliced bread, right? We want to give those folks feedback from people, advocates that are working with the vast majority of patients impacted by cancer, and give the hard feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing too. We have a lot of ways that we are really trying to make sure that we, in what we're doing as an organization and driving forward patient centric breakthroughs, that we are incorporating what's going to be most meaningful to patients, what
Yep.
is most meaningful to the advocacy community. So,
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I can't tell you the number of times. It always seems to be a marketing campaign, perhaps, as the crux of where advocacy really can help drive a conversation or at least reframe the mission and what we're trying to do. But with that in mind, what do you still find to be the most misunderstood or common misunderstanding of the advocacy function?
yeah, it's another good question. And, even when I talk to my husband, he's like, I'm not sure I really understand what you do. But advocacy isn't just a run walk. It's not about funding an organization for a feel good type of program or
Yeah.
initiative. It's about, like I mentioned before, it's aligning on what's going to be meaningful to patients and to our organization. I'd like to say, I think a lot of times people see advocacy as very transactional and that it's all about us providing funding. There's definitely a place for that. There's definitely a place for fundraising, for galas, for run walks to
Yeah.
raise awareness, but it's more about these real partnerships. It's about sitting down at the table. To me, and I've always said this, we're fortunate in that we have so many subject matter experts at our organization that we can bring to the table with our
Mm.
partners. And that's almost in a lot of ways more valued. If you sit down with the right people and you're solutioning together, the funding then that may follow is going to benefit, even be a
A
larger portion of funding,
larger
right? That
impact.
we're
Yeah.
able to get from different parts of the business because we are truly being strategic in what we're driving forward. So, I guess in answer to your question, a lot of times people think advocacy is really about being transactional, funding a run walk. But I truly see advocacy, and I think many who do this work see it
Yeah.
as much more strategic and working together and bringing together the best minds so that we can make the most meaningful difference for patients, supporting them. And I think, too, that's when I think about our advocacy ecosystem, right? It's this type of work that's driving forward the right initiatives, that's ultimately going to help patients that are facing barriers to care. So,
Yeah, I mean, as we think about healthcare, it's not as simple as some might think it is, right? Well, the patient got a diagnosis and now they're going to get a treatment. There are so many more levers and impact points along the way that hold back the diagnosis, that hold back a correct diagnosis, that
mhm,
hold them back from treatment, that's where advocacy is really coming in to help tell that story. But as you know better than anyone else, when you know one patient, you know one patient,
right. Yeah.
right? And that's where I think we call it advocacy intelligence. That's where the true strategic value of advocacy can really help heft its weight is on that knowledge that you know is around the corner that others don't know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, and also kind of going back to why I do what I do. I think I, like so many, probably everyone at this point in time, we know someone who has been someone close to us who's been impacted by cancer.
Yep.
And, in 2013, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He had had a long
Mm.
history of heart disease. and never thought, no one in my family ever had been diagnosed with cancer. My mom was a nurse for 50 years,
Sure.
earned her 50-year, nursing
Wow.
certification, and, kudos to her, right? And I had,
Yeah.
was the resident healthcare expert in my family, having been in the
It
biopharma
always.
industry for many years. But, when it happens to you, it's like, where's the navigator? I know there's
Yeah.
nurse navigators out there, but unfortunately, he was diagnosed very late. But it was,
Oh,
how
I'm
can we
sorry.
get support? He passed away 4 months post his diagnosis. Thank you.
Ah,
But it was like, here's my mom, who had been a nurse for 50 years. I knew enough about the healthcare
yeah.
system to be asking questions, but the resources, to your point, like, they just weren't there. And that was back in 2013. The role of the navigator has definitely evolved since then, and I know there's more of them around to help support patients. But it's a challenge. And at that point, it
Yeah.
wasn't as much about accessing, care. He had insurance, he had these things, but it's finding the resources that he needed. I'm like, you need to get a second opinion. No, he didn't need a second opinion. I'm like, Dad, you need to get a second opinion. It's about
Yeah.
advocating for yourself too, and knowing the right
Yeah.
questions to ask. So,
And so many people, we're doing a lot now. We've developed a couple of tools direct to patient to ensure that patients, as you said very early in this conversation, recognize that their voice matters. As we try to tell patients, your doctor doesn't know what you don't tell them, right?
yep.
And if we walk in with a very paternalistic mindset of your provider, you might be disappointed, or you might not get the value of the care that you're seeking. And we've launched what's called our Empowered Patient both app and tool that allow patients to both identify all of the disease state nonprofits that are out there for them so that they know where they can go, but then to arm them with their own insights and data so that they're able to track their own symptoms and side effects of both treatment and disease and be better prepared for that unfortunate 7 minutes on average that we get with a clinician.
Wow.
It's, as you said, you put yourself in those shoes as the resident healthcare expert for your family. I just put myself back in for the 18 years that I battled chronic pain of what was I doing for me and what would have made that easier or better. But for everyone else, what would have driven those numbers down than 18 years?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's where we see a lot of the innovation from an organization like yours really coming into play. I'm not going to lie, we know plenty of organizations that have heard what your teams are doing and say, you know what, we should do that. And I think that's a testament and a compliment to what your teams have done, is that you're innovating, you're bringing the voice in, you're doing things that others haven't done. I guess the question becomes is how do you get that ability to do that within the space that you're working?
Uh, so just to
To be
clarify, is your,
innovative.
yeah, to be innovative.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's, we've had the ability, and as I mentioned, we're continuing to do the education. And fortunately, it's consistent. We've been working in oncology advocacy within our organizations since 2010. I think many of the people that, started our function, and we work both on a patient side and a professional organization side. I think one of the keys too is that within our function, within oncology specifically, there's not a lot of turnover
Yeah.
within our group, right? So it's fairly consistent. I know advocacy sits in so many different functions
Oh
at
yeah.
different organizations, and we've had the ability and I guess have been fortunate to have our advocacy functions sit within commercial. We're
Mm-hmm.
able to demonstrate alignment with the business. We consistently lead and manage these strategic relationships. And so I think the business does see the value. In
Yeah.
fact, when I first started in this role in oncology advocacy, we sat, I don't want to say buried within another organization, but we moved around into
Sure.
different functions in commercial. And a few years ago, the patient voice was elevated to more of a leadership level. And so my boss sits on that commercial leadership team. And
Yeah.
so it's much more visible, and the patient voice is, I think, has always been valued, but it's much more visible and seen. And we are being asked hard questions, right? We are
Sure.
being asked to show, I hate to say metrics, but it's more about impact, right? The
Yeah.
impact of the
Yep.
work that we're doing. So we're thinking things differently about how we show that impact. We know it's impactful in the work that we
Yeah.
do, but we are able to now think a little bit differently, especially with technology and AI.
Sure.
I think it's easier to show that impact and demonstrate that impact of partnership, right? And not just about X number of views of a video,
Yes.
but it's what's the action a patient's going to take after they see that video,
Yep.
or after they have access to a resource, what action are they taking, to maybe go have another conversation with their provider versus just seeing something. How can we demonstrate that the patients are actioning on that and it's helping
Yeah.
them, empowering them, similar to what you just mentioned, empowering them to have that conversation and to
Yep.
advocate for themselves, because
Yeah.
we know that, as you know, what you mentioned before too, providers are so busy, and it's up to patients and advocates to come to the table. But I guess going back to your original question, how do we have the opportunity to innovate? Fortunately, at our company, innovation in AI is talked about day in and day out of every
Sure.
call that you're on, right? And so it's thinking of things differently, and how can we drive forward innovation. I mentioned our insight forums. One of the things that
Hmm.
we started doing a couple years ago, and I think you mentioned this in the opening, was we were using an earlier version of an internally developed AI tool where we were able to quickly expedite access to the insights that we were getting from our forums to colleagues across the
Ah.
organization. So I was at a meeting last year, and some companies were saying, and this was even last summer, I think you were at the same meeting. Well, we
Sure.
track our insights on spreadsheets and we're able to
Yes.
access them in
Yes.
that way. Well, we similarly a couple of years ago had all these insights in Teams folders and
Yep.
Word documents. Well, we said, hey, with AI moving forward, and again, looking at where our company has been going, we've had the fortunate ability to utilize AI early on, and it's continuing to evolve. And we really see the value as being incorporated into everything that we're doing. The patient advocacy work is no different. The R&D work is no different. Really, it's, we know that we need to incorporate it. We need to innovate. We need to think differently. And so we're consistently being challenged to do so. And if we're not, we're going to be left behind. And so I
Sure.
think that's the fortunate place that we are right now, and that we're being challenged to innovate. And when our leaders see that we're doing that, they want to work with us. They want to and see the value of the patient work that we're doing.
Yeah. And the ability that you have there and sharing those insights is unfortunate, that it is so different than a lot of other teams. But I think that's where the value continues to get recognized in the work that you do, is that those insights get shared far and wide. I'm working with some teams that insights from last ASCO are just getting out, right? And we just got done with ASCO this year. And how sad is that? We were able to sit down with folks, get their stories, but they didn't really get anywhere. And that's where I think with you that AI has the opportunity to help shift that. I don't know about you. Do you have any fears with AI as you think about the advocacy space?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that comes up all the time. In fact, we were in a meeting at ASCO with ASCO leadership, right? I mean, one of the big things that came up from our leadership and ASCO leadership was patients getting access to credible information,
Mm,
right? And
yeah,
so, you know, are the chat GPTs of the world? I hate to call out anything, but
yeah,
are
yeah,
patients getting access to reliable information? And so we're thinking about how can we forge partnerships with credible, trusted organizations on the professional side and the patient side. How can we work together so the credible patient information is being matched and disseminated through these professional organizations using
yeah,
AI, right? So whether it's bringing in a digital technology partner, or is it something that we as an organization with our digital team can help develop, right? So
yeah,
it's all about expediting to patients access to the right information, the right credible information at the right time, so that patients can move it forward.
Sure.
Separately, we've one of the initiatives that formed out of our POPSI work has been focused on health equity. And one of my colleagues is actually leading that. It was a pilot that we launched in Texas a couple years ago through a bunch of community listening sessions. Bottom line, where we landed was patients were not getting access to the resources that they needed that were credible, quickly, at the right time.
Hmm.
We were working with community health workers to say, what are you currently doing to help
Yeah.
patients navigate to the right resources, whether it be funding or transportation or lodging? And what was happening was these community health workers were may find a resource, but you know what? There was no more funds left in that pot of money,
Yeah.
right? So we actually worked with a vendor, this was 2 years ago, to develop a resource matching tool based on generative AI. And
Yeah.
fast forward, we since have, through an RFP process, have another advocacy organization now owns this tool, and they're working to scale it more broadly. So again, we've been thinking for a couple years, how can we solve this
Yeah.
problem of patients getting access to credible information at the right time? And so we're working through these organizations, trying to bridge them together. We know the advocacy groups have credible information, and the professional organizations, providers are wanting to get access to this information to get to patients. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. I mean,
Yeah.
certainly there's a fear, and I think the biggest fear is people not getting access to credible information. So we're trying to think how we can forge these partnerships so we are convening the right groups so patients are getting access, moving forward some really cool, innovative partnerships.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I actually just was part of the American College of Osteopathic Family Physicians meeting,
Oh,
where
cool.
that was a lot of the same concern and focus, but in this case, it was focused on vaccines and vaccine hesitancy, and how do we ensure that we get the right information out? Who are patients listening to? How do we get information into the hands of the professionals as well so that they feel comfortable having those same conversations? And exactly as you said, a lot of it was evaluating what's already there. And then how do we pull together instead of rebuilding something that is already available?
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. Absolutely. Just one other thing that I
Yeah.
think about as it relates to advocacy and patients getting access to the right resources. Um, I feel like there's such a great opportunity. And I don't know if this is the right number, you may know, but
Yeah.
roughly 30% or less of patients ever find an advocacy organization when
Yep.
they are diagnosed with some sort of a chronic condition, right? So in this day and age, how can we change that? Like, to
Yep.
me, this is a big idea that we're trying to solve for, right? We know
Yeah.
that in how we speak to the business, I presented this to our strategic plan to leadership. We know that if patients get access to affordability resources that they can get from an advocacy organization or psychosocial support, they're more likely to get access and stay on a
Yeah.
medication, right? And that's with any medication, not just a cancer
Yeah.
medication. And so, thinking about, we've worked with one advocacy organization and a health system on a pilot where there's an automatic trigger within an EHR that once a patient is diagnosed with blood cancer, they have an automatic
Yeah.
referral unless they opt out to an advocacy organization. How
That's
can something
fantastic.
like that be scaled, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so those are the kinds of things, like from a technology AI standpoint, to like how can we bridge that gap so people are getting the information that they can really help them, and quite
Yes.
honestly that they need and that they deserve. So
Could not agree more. In fact, I launched what's called the Advocate Bridge, advocatebridge.org, about 2 months ago, which is exactly in that same vein. I did a TEDx talk on the power of patient advocacy in April of last year. It got about a little over 1 million views in 7 months. And the common question was, how do I find one? And I couldn't let that stand. So I built Advocate Bridge. And what it's done is basically crawled the
Hmm.
internet for all of the advocacy organizations are out there, put them in one spot, and then you put in your diagnosis and it surfaces all of
Wow.
the disease state nonprofits, but also professional societies as well. If you're looking for a medical professional, you have that, but then also independent patient advocates in your area if there isn't a navigator. And then, as
Hmm.
you referenced, a lot of the dialogue was, well, what about the financial resources? So patients can come, advocates themselves can come to that site and can utilize the financial tool to identify all of the different branded and non-branded product patient assistance programs as well. Because again, the mindset was, how do
Hmm.
we lower the
Yeah,
number of clicks that a patient's got to take if they've already began that search? And then to tie that back, of course, SEO wise with the YouTube video that was already out there to help drive folks to a one-stop shop to get the resources that they needed.
that's awesome. I'll have to check that
Yeah,
out.
please do. Honestly, you guys have done such amazing work, but the one thing I want to call out is the focus on professional societies. Because I would say that as the last 2 years have gone on in the industry, and let's call it what it is, it's been an uphill battle for a lot of advocacy functions as budgets have gotten tighter. We've seen a lot pull back from professional societies, and I personally think that's a mistake. What value do you guys see in working with the professional societies to assist patients?
Yeah, tremendous value. And again, it was not my vision. It was back in 2010 when my predecessor saw the need for creating this type of function in oncology because of the large number of not only advocacy organizations but also
Mm,
professional organizations. And I guess I think quite simply about shared decision making. And
yes.
it's about the patient and the provider at the end of the day, right? In
Yep.
bridging those two. And I think that from a patient advocacy standpoint, you can't fully understand that until you bridge that with a professional organization as well,
Yeah.
whether
Yep.
it be a pharmacist, whether it be an oncologist, whether it be a navigator, whether it be an advanced practitioner. There's so many key stakeholders in that multidisciplinary cancer care team that are instrumental to, quite honestly, the success of a patient
Yeah.
to live longer when prescribed, when faced with a cancer diagnosis and treated, right? And so I think it makes so much sense to have
Yeah.
advocacy and professional organization society management. And again, I know some companies have professional organizations managed in medical.
Hmm.
We have been just firm believers that from that maintenance of relationships over time, um, but truly bridging the advocacy and professional relations function makes so much sense to us.
Sure.
And that we are at the table. And I think we see even from our advocacy ecosystem that I mentioned,
Yeah.
patient advocacy 360 ecosystem, we have patient organizations and professional organizations at the table, many
Yep.
of whom probably would never have met each other.
Sure.
And so we're consistently connecting different organizations based on the work the patient organization's doing, can maybe work through the professional organization to amplify this great survey or report that you just released on access and affordability and what
Yeah.
barriers patients are facing on utilization management. And so, I mean, we do that on a daily basis. It's that connectivity.
Yeah.
Whereas if the functions are managed at different parts of the company or not managed at all, it, in my opinion, is a real miss.
Yeah.
Because that it takes that connectivity, especially in oncology, with the large number of organizations that are at the table to help patients truly navigate such a complex,
Very.
diagnosis.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And as coming back to that vein that you referenced there with shared decision making, I tell the general patient community and general public this all the time that the industry and your provider have the same desire, which is for you and your doctor to make the decision that's best for you, and everyone else get out of the way. Right. And that's really what you're doing when you're bringing the professional society and the patient advocacy organizations together, is allowing them to figure out what's best for the patient, to educate all the patients that are out there, and ensure that that relationship is one that's able to take place in the first place, but is a good one as well. I want to just take us back real quick because you had referenced, you obviously weren't always in pharmaceutical space. What did you do coming out of college?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So I got my degree in accounting
Mm-hmm.
and I worked in public accounting and got my CPA. So I
Oh,
worked for one of at the time it was the big six.
yep,
And they are still around but have a different name. It's a bridge now. But so
yep,
that's what I did. That was my first job out of college. I worked actually in audit And I was consistently looking for what people were doing wrong in audit. And I'm like, this is not
Yeah.
what I want to do for the rest of my life. But quite honestly, it was a great background. I got a job right out of college
Yeah.
and I was in the business school and I was exposed to a lot of different industries. It was a cool job. But I knew it's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So then I actually worked for a large retailer and I audited health insurance plans that administered benefits. It was a large retailer
Wow.
for all of their divisions and they workers comp, health insurance, looked at workers comp claims. So I did that for about a year. And then I sold accounting software. Um, and I kind of knew that I wanted to my goal was to get into the pharmaceutical industry. My brother actually worked for the company that I work for now. At the time, he left a couple of years later. But anyway, after the accounting software sales, I entered the industry in sales. So
That's
that
awesome.
was kind of my career journey. So within that short span of, let's see, I guess 6 years, I had four different jobs, and then I've been at the same company for 29 years. So
It's so funny to see how similar of backgrounds. I had four jobs in the first 4 years after college as well, and it was all healthcare related, but in different disciplines in healthcare, from pharma to biotech, market research, all things that ended up serving me. And ultimately, as I hear about the work that you were doing, you were learning the business side of it. And honestly, I would say, from an accounting perspective, how to speak to the business as well, which has probably served you really well in your current role to be able to bring it back to what matters to the business as a whole.
yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other similarity that we have too is, and I think this is maybe the connectivity too with advocacy is I played team sports my whole life.
Yep.
I played college soccer. And
Yeah.
I think it's always thinking about the contributions of the team. Certainly,
Mm.
individual contributions are important, but it's really that team effort. One of my favorite quotes is if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And I
Yeah.
truly think that when it comes to advocacy, like that's what it's all about.
Oh, yeah.
Advocacy and teamwork. I see the real value of my team and of our broader patient solutions team when we come together, the work that we can do truly to drive forward impactful initiatives for patients. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So, in conjunction with our partners. So,
And it's truly second to none. One of the things that I did want to call out is, as you think about that advocacy and engagement function, you had talked about a lot of the times there's such more value over the funding in just bringing some of the professionals that you have from your organization out to them, or to bring those organizations in to learn from those professionals. We see that year after year after year in our research as far as what is of most value. And it's never the check. It's always the helping us to do our work better that we
mhm.
constantly see. So I commend you guys on that opportunity as well.
Thank you. And I think one of the really appreciate that. And again, it takes a village, the work that
Yeah.
I couldn't do without my team, without our broader team, without the support of leadership, and certainly without our partners. But for the past 3 years, and this will be the fourth year, I mentioned these patient steering committees that we have
Yeah.
we're calling them Insight Forum, Advocacy 360 Insight Forums now, as we're reframing under our Patient Advocacy 360. But
Yeah.
we've brought all the committees together in one live meeting. So for the past three
Wow.
years at one of our R&D facilities last year, and we're going to do the same this year at our headquarters the 2 years prior. And so at our R&D facilities, I mean, we've had some of our scientists meet these patients virtually. Certainly they come into some of the virtual forums, but for them to be there and really just hear firsthand from the patients, get the insights firsthand. Our leaders, our senior leadership in oncology, was at the table with us last year at this meeting, and it's to your point of how do we get leadership buy-in. It's getting them at the table to see the impact and the value and what these patients and what their real
Yeah.
voices are bringing,
Yep.
because I think they get so busy, especially in the R&D space, that they know it's important, but we've created that forum for them
Hmm.
to be able to interact and get really great feedback and insight from these patients to help us do our job better and
Yeah.
really deliver patient-centric innovation. So
It's
anyway,
always a great thing to get that reminder from a patient as to what is so important, right?
yeah,
And I love that you're doing that in-house. We've been working with a couple of organizations to stop going off-site, but to rather bring them to you, bring them to your locations. It's great for morale within the organization in the first place, but it also ensures that that disease state nonprofit, may they be a professional society or a patient advocacy organization, that they feel special.
yeah,
And there's no bigger impact on corporate reputation from our research than access to leadership, right? So
right.
if they're at the table and they're engaged in the conversation, that's just going to do not just great things for the relationships that you have, but for the way that they look at your company as well.
Absolutely. Like all
Yeah.
around it's a win-win. So appreciate it on all sides. So
Yeah. My last question for you, it's my same question I ask everybody. If you could go back to that girl that graduated from college, looking at accounting, and obviously you found your way into the industry and found your passion in advocacy, what would you go back and tell that 22-year-old if you could go and talk to her today?
yeah, well, I happen to have a 23-year-old daughter who is also in the industry, which is not the same company, but
Oh,
so I tend to give her a lot of advice, and
there
I
you
think she
go.
appreciates some of it. But I actually have a few things that I would tell myself. The first, and I think this goes back to one of your prior questions, was the career that you plan may not be the career that you end up, but
Yeah.
every stepping stone along the way is for a reason, and everything happens for a reason.
Yep.
And I think at the end of the day, and I'm seeing this now, that the culmination of my career to date, it all really makes sense. And it's that
Mm,
where you start is may not where you end up, but it all happens for a reason. I think that's one thing.
yeah.
Another is, I think many of us, like it has to be the perfect time, like everything has to be right. Like take some risks as long
Yeah.
as you can from a personal standpoint manage
Mm,
it. And I think most of the time leaders, if you want to move into a certain position, they are going to recognize the importance of the work life balance and whatever you may need. And so it's may not always be the perfect time, but be willing to take the risk and advocate for what you need, whatever it might
yeah.
be. And I think one of the big things that I think is so important is just gratitude. At the end of the day, it really makes sure that that you're thanking people. That gratitude really, I think, keeps us grounded, especially when
Mm,
things get hard. I started a couple of years ago a gratitude journal. And every morning I write in the journal, and
yeah.
it really sets the stage for the day and for everything that I do. And so, just the importance of gratitude. And I think maybe it's because of the advocacy work that we do, and we see the importance of every day and what it means.
Yeah.
Somebody impacted by cancer or another chronic condition, but just the importance of gratitude is so meaningful to
Yeah.
me. I mean, the list could go on and on. I have a
Uh,
lot of things, but I think those are the key ones. I guess one last is progress over perfection, and I think it goes back to it may not always be exactly the right time,
yeah.
but sometimes letting go of the details that aren't as important. It's about
Yeah.
moving things forward and prioritizing what's most important. We can't do everything. It's working as a team, but moving forward together. So,
That's fantastic advice for anyone that's listening from all backgrounds. So I really appreciate that. And I'm a big believer too that everything happens for a reason. People always ask me, would you change those 18 years? No, I wouldn't, because it's what got me here. It's what's given me the knowledge that it did to recognize the voice of the patient and the value of it, having that been that patient that felt ignored, and to make sure that no one ever feels that way. So I could not agree with you more. Susan, it's been an absolute privilege. We'll ensure to break this up and clip it up for you so that you can share it with your audience and give kudos to your team as they're rightfully due. And I'm sure your daughter's ears are ringing as we speak. Well, thank you
definitely.
again.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate the opportunity and again, the platform that you've built to elevate the importance of advocacy. I think we all know it's the long game, and that one of my other favorite sayings that I actually got from a very wise person was the day you need a friend isn't the day to make a friend. and that
Mm.
with advocacy, we're in it for the long game. So
Yes. Yep. Could not agree more. Thank you so, so much for your time.
thank you.